you can start.
Okay, so the first 2 weeks were, first week was Brooklyn to Colorado to the Continental Divide at Hoosier Pass at like 11:05. And then last week was Hoosier Pass from Colorado up to Missoula, Montana, in northern Montana, and then down to Oregon and into, so it's this orange line here. So it was Pueblo and the pass is somewhere here. Then it was up here through the Rockies, just going north and even more north, up higher than the map is showing at the moment. And then coming back south, going to Eugene and to the coast. And that got us to last week. This week, it's down the coast, which is actually way hillier than I was expecting, annoyingly up and down all the time. And you can't, there's no bombing the hills. Like every hill has a super steep hairpin turn when it crosses the bottom, and you have to be going like 10 miles an hour. So
since we are looking back, I have a question. It looks like you added a hell of a lot of mileage as opposed to going from Colorado over to San Francisco and Berkeley straight across, or am I?
Yes, it added a ton of miles. Well, the whole, just to get to Eugene from Brooklyn was like 4,500 miles instead of 3,000, because there was no point in going from down here in Pueblo all the way up to Missoula, you know, going all the way north and then coming back south, except the point wasn't to get to the West Coast, which I might have said on the first week, if I wanted to get to the West Coast, I would have flown. The point was to ride my bicycle. So whatever distance, there is no extra distance. It's just a nice.
Okay, so you wanted to see these things along the way that you showed us last week to Oregon. Yeah, okay. Wyoming and.
Yeah, the Rockies are great. So it's 1,100 miles from Pueblo to Missoula, and almost all of it is like, it's kind of west, but it's north. It's mostly north and a little bit west. And there was no need for it, but except that the Rockies are nice. And Pueblo is way south of New York. And there was no need to go there either, except it's nicer. So it was all just to stay on adventure cycling routes. And they made their route because the terrain kept changing and you go through different areas and it doesn't get boring. And it's kind of looking for nice roads that are not heavily trafficked, or, you know, kind of the best you can find overall. So yeah, so way out of the way if getting there directly was my goal. So today, so we're down here. So it was Eugene down the coast to San Francisco over to Berkeley. And then this kind of pink route is another adventure cycling route that's, I think, called Western Express. And I took that through Sacramento, over the Sierras, by Lake Tahoe, Carson City, through this Nevada desert. That's the this US 50. That's somebody coined the term the loneliest road, because there's really nothing along this US 50 here. And then instead of going into Utah down there, when I got around here, right near the border, I went up towards Provo and Salt Lake City, and a friend of mine who lives in Park City, which is outside of Salt Lake City, came down and met me and picked me up in the car so I wouldn't have to drive through this sort of Salt Lake, Provo, you know, traffic. And there was also forest fire there, as it turned out. So it was pretty smoky and it would have been really nasty. And while I'm here, I'm going to just do the whole map thing. So this is so the coast is the coast. There's not that much interesting. From San Francisco.
I get myself on video now. You see that?
Okay, someone's, let me mute everybody. Sorry. Hang on. There we go. Now can we hear you, Ed? I'm going to unmute you. Carry on, Ed. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, so I go through, so Berkeley's here on the other side of the bay from San Francisco. I went up here over some bridge through Vacaville, Sacramento, over the Sierras. And you can see, now that it's zoomed in, you can see more of the terrain here. The Sierras were really tough. I think if you started in San Francisco and just tried to ride over the Sierras, it would be really hard because it just gets really steep, in a couple of days. So it's better that I had a few months under my belt. So it goes past Tahoe, Carson City. I spent the night in Carson City, night in Fallon. There's hardly anything in between Carson City and Fallon. Fallon is where Fallon Station is where Top Gun was filmed, I guess, Naval Air Station. This Middle Gate, East Gate, there's one store. This is the only place, there's another road. It's some gravelly thing that has even less traffic than 50, but I stayed on 50 to Austin. And then it's easier to just do the next map. So Fallon, Austin, from Austin to Eureka, there's absolutely nothing between Austin and Eureka, except a bunch of hills. And there's nothing between Eureka and Ely, except a bunch more hills. And there's nothing at all between Ely and Baker. So each of those is just do your 50, 60, 70 miles, and there's not even a gas station. There's nothing at all. So you need everything with you. And from here, from right before Baker, I went through this Eaksdale and kind of went to Delta. So in Delta, I stayed at the home of one of these warm showers guys who was really nice. So we'll see a picture of him later. And this is just a little zoomed in view of like Austin, Eureka, Ely. And you can see more the hills. So you go over a big hill, and then it's just flat, flat, flat. You go over a big hill, and this road is just dead flat, and you see it go for like 40 miles in front of you, and you know your next 4 hours is just this. And up another hill, down a hill. So it's basin and range, they call it. I think there's a basin and range book by, what's his name, John McPhee, maybe. So let us get to the photo section here. New share.
Gay people have sex and it's abomination. Thank you.
What is that?
Okay, so this is restarting where we were at. So this is day like day 2 or 3 after I hit the coast, where I finally got to see the water, because the first couple of days it was blocked by sand dunes, and then there was fog, and finally I saw the water, and it is pretty. And if you remember from last week, it was ridiculously trafficked. So it's RVs, pickup trucks, and you see both directions traffic. And sometimes there's a shoulder and sometimes not, but it's always kind of noisy and annoying. So here's at least the fog has lifted here. There's a nice view, and you can see this nice bridge in the distance. And when I get there, it turns out, of course, it's just packed with cars, and they're all going really fast, and I didn't feel safe riding on the road. So I walked on this little path, and it's too narrow to ride because there's like a 2-foot drop off onto the road, and the railing on the right is not high. So I was fine walking on it, but it was not for riding. This is kind of a typical town, not particularly scenic. Fog as always, depending on, how high you are, but pretty much if you get this, the town is at the low point. As soon as you get up maybe 100 feet, you're back in the fog. And they sell gifts and t-shirts, and there's a bunch of cafes and RV parks. So that was typical town along the coast. You definitely don't want to go there in August. I think September would have been much nicer. Here's the nice road. Fog. You can almost make out a little surf on the right. So it was just very foggy and annoying. So after being too hot for like 3 months, as soon as I hit the coast, all of a sudden it's kind of 55 to 65 all day and no more sun. So I almost got to hoping for sun, though. If there would have been no cars, it would have been good. I like the temperature. This was a lucky drop down far enough to see the water before I climbed back up into the fog. And this sign was very ironic, the Oregon Coast Bike Route. You can see here, so here's a nice rumble strips. You have like a foot with reflectors, so you can't ride there with a, you can't tell, but this is like a 1 foot drop off.
Wow.
So pretty much you're riding in the road with all that traffic. So not really bike friendly. Here's another bridge I walked over. This is like each one is like a 15-minute walk, you know, because it's like a mile or more, you know, 2 miles, you have the approach and you walk over it. Another nice little narrow walkway with a bunch of cars and trucks and, you know, big recreational vehicles driven by people who rented them and don't know how they work. So the road was not the place to be here. And then I get to California. So Oregon was really kind of sucky. California was no better, though a little bit better. So this is a daylight headlight section, which means people can't see and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of accidents. So on the one hand, it made me happy to think maybe that meant the cars will be careful. On the other hand, it meant it's a bad stretch of road. But the scenery is nice. So I think if there was no cars and no fog, it might have been nice. So after like 4 or 5 days of that, I saw the road was getting even worse and worse. So I did a 3-bus, this is a local bus, kind of a 20 passenger thing. And I went and looked on the internet. I brought my MacBook Air with me and I saw that 3 buses that cost $20 total would get me like 100, 120 miles from the miserable rainy coast with the traffic into the redwoods. So I did these 3 buses and got into redwood land in, it kind of took all day from like 7 in the morning till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, but it was sort of interesting to take the bus. This is a view from the bus. The driver actually stopped. There was an elk herd and we took some elk pictures. Meanwhile, it was like kind of pouring rain. So I was happy to be in the bus.
Were you using lights in the fog?
I have lights on all the time. Yes, I have a rear and front and rear lights going all the time that are visible in the daytime, so totally visible at night.
Ooh,
I
what is
hope it
that?
wakes drivers up.
Is that a redwood?
That's a redwood, yes. So now I'm in the redwoods. So now there's no more fog, and I'm in the redwoods, and it's incredibly beautiful, and there's not a ton of traffic, and what cars there are just so blissed out about being in the redwoods. They're all really nice, and you know they're driving slowly. There's another road that goes around the redwoods. So if you're in a hurry, you take the fast road with the 70-mile-an-hour speed limit and no turns. And if you want to see redwoods, you go here and you drive at 30. And they were happy to go at 15 and just wait till there was room because they're looking at the trees. So very beautiful, nice place. So a great bus ride for sure. I got there early enough to take a tour with the ranger with the hat, you know, who walked us with the families, and they took, you know, somebody in the tour took my picture by a tree. It's just impossible to capture the size of the trees, but they're really big, as you all know. But you know, the thing that you can't see is just how peaceful like the sound and the kind of perfect moisture is just really incredibly great there.
Were those municipal or privately run buses?
Municipal. They were kind of county things mostly. State, county, you know, local city. But none of them were private. And that's why they were so cheap. Like to get 120 miles on $20, each one was like $6 to go, you know, like 30 miles. with the bike. Very nice. So I got to camp in the redwoods, which I had really.
So that tree you showed looked like it had been in a fire. Debbie's asking, did you see any kind of remnants of, forest fires of the past, or you didn't quite go through those?
Not in the redwoods. Yeah, you could see they have charred bottoms. Like it burns out the other stuff and doesn't bother them. So when there gets to be enough other things growing, eventually there'll be a fire, and the redwoods just generally laugh at it. And their bark is so thick that it's really hard to burn down a redwood. There were forest fires in the other section. I didn't show any photos, but I was riding through forest fires going from Missoula to the coast in a few spots in Idaho, especially.
Wow.
So camping in the redwoods was great. And it was hard to find. And here I could have stayed in a town, but it was just so nice to camp in the redwoods. And there are these groves.
Did you post that picture in my bike leaning against things?
I
There's a Facebook page. That would be a very good picture for it.
have a lot of my
Yeah.
bike things, that's for sure.
Wow.
And this was a picture of a bird. This is still in the redwoods, but there's one place where you go over a bridge, and it's like, oh, look at that, there's the bird. So I caught the bird with my phone that I pulled out. What it is, I don't know, some kind of big bird that eats things. And here's at least it's the specialized tourists. So it's not just they're selling t-shirts and shells, they're selling things that somebody made it with a chainsaw or something. And they make Bigfoots and eagles and stuff. This is one of the old redwoods where back, I suppose in the 20s or even in the late 1800s, they would make a hole in it. You've probably seen pictures of people driving their cars through it. So this is kind of ride your bike through it. Luckily, they don't do that anymore. It's not good for the tree, for sure. And here's some steep hills, 7%, that goes on for miles and miles. But it was not hot, and it was not crowded, and it wasn't foggy. And then, of course, at the bottom of it, I'm back on the coast in California, and we're back to the fog. And
so besides the signs of Bigfoot that you saw, did you actually see any signs of Bigfoot?
Oh, of course. Here's the deer, but they're not running from me on the road.
By the way, haven't you seen the commercial? I think Bigfoot is now captured on a Progressive commercial and says his name is actually Daryl, right?
Yeah.
Wow, they didn't run away?
No, they just look at me. They were in the yard, and they're like, you're not exactly coming this way. And these flowers are pink ladies. All along the California coast here, there's these pink ladies that were very nice. This is a B&B I stayed in, a regular bed and breakfast on the coast in a nice little town. I think it was Westport. Foggy and wet, and I just barely managed to get into the one restaurant in town for dinner because I didn't have a reservation. Who knew that you need a reservation there? So now I'm kind of back in civilization where I got a great meal, but it was packed, and it was nice of them to let me in. I kind of shared a table with some other people, and it wasn't the kind of sharing table place, but they could see that there was no way I was going to get to eat anything if I didn't eat there. And this finally, I get a bike path next to the water. This is what I was thinking the coast would be like. This probably goes on for 5 miles, maybe 10, not that much in the hundreds of miles I had to do, but this was my dream of what it's like to ride down the coast. You're on a bike path next to the water through the heather there. And there's people around to take your picture, and you hear the ocean going. So this was a really nice section for an hour. And this woman is from Holland. Her name is Maura. I saw her 3 or 4 different days, multiple days apart. This was the second or third time I had ridden with her. we would just meet up and we'd talk for a few minutes, and she was faster. She's in her 20s, and she was going from Canada to Mexico, and she kind of had to make time, and I was not in any hurry. So she had a real schedule to meet. But meanwhile, she didn't really get that much ahead of me. Partly because I took the bus and saved like 120 miles. I found out later, she camped with me that night with my tent. When I set up, she pulled in like a few hours later into the same campground next to me. She had also taken a bus, but she only did one bus for like 20 or 30 miles over the worst section of it. So I think I saved the day on her there. And I started earlier than her, but she rode later.
So this has nothing to do with this picture, but one that you showed earlier. Did you see any naked ladies on the trip?
Not that I know.
That's a trick question, because those pink flowers that you referred to, Amy just told us they're called naked ladies also. And I just thought I would take advantage of that.
Now that you mention it, that sounds familiar. They were saying they're naked ladies. And I was like, oh yeah. That's...
You thought, where's Alan coming from on this?
No, when you said that, I'm like, yes, I did. But what? Yes, they are called naked ladies. So this is how you know you're really in civilization. Spendocino is only 18 miles, and Berkeley is still a ways, 264 kilometers. But once people start making signs like this, Spendocino especially, as soon as I hit the coast, salads and cappuccinos were ubiquitous, which was a nice change from my hamburger every day in the middle of the country. And this is kind of so finally, if the cloud lifts, it's sort of nice, and you can see up here the road. So you wind up being up here and doing these sort of 300 to 500, 600 foot climbs, like 4 or 5 times a day, where you're just going up, 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 down, down, down. So this thing switchbacks around, comes around here. And it's just up and down, but not like the rolling hills here, where you can go down fast and come back up part way. There you really have to slog your way back up it. This is another day or two later, another not quite a B&B, but a big kind of hotel complex up on a cliff, of course. So I had to ride my bike up. So there's Bigfoot. Speaking of Bigfoot, he was petrified he's a big Bigfoot too. And of course, he's an all-American Bigfoot. And in the store right next to that, to really know you're in civilization, they were selling all kinds of toys and books, and they had a mensch on a bench, which I have never even seen. So I'm in the middle of nowhere. I think I probably hadn't seen a Jew for for a couple of thousand miles. So now I'm on the coast. So there's Jews and mensches on the bench. This is Fort Ross, which is a Russian fort along the coast, because the Russians they were in Alaska, but they came as far south as this. This is only 100, 200 miles north of San Francisco.
Sorry, when was this?
In the 1800s.
Wow, really? Because
as what's her name, Sarah Palin said, she could see Russia, right?
Right.
So, they were along the coast here at the same time as the Spanish were leaving. The Russians were kind of filling in. But it didn't work because it was a little too far for them, and we were closer. And it's a National Historic Site that was not open because I got there at like 8:30 in the morning. And I probably would have gone for a look. I like places like that, but it looked nice. This is some more windy road. You can just see, it's just really tight switchbacks, and you're just going up and down all these headlands. But it is a pretty view. And because this section here was so windy, there's another road that eliminates this. So there was not nearly as much traffic on this. So that was a nice change also. And there's all these secluded beaches that you can park somewhere and walk a few hundred yards and get to this little beach all by yourself. Cold water, I think, but very pretty. And as soon as I got on the coast, I'm meeting people all the time. Generally, people are going from north to south, but some people go the other way. There's supposed to be a prevailing wind from the north, though there wasn't really much wind at all for the week or so I was there. I rode with these guys for a few hours, but they were younger, stronger, faster than me. And then they took off, but they took my picture, so that was nice. And then this is my friend Matt. So his wife drove him out with his bike. He's a big cyclist, so not a touring cyclist. So he has some super duper light bike. You can kind of see his front light on. He also does lights all the time. So he got driven out, whatever, 50, 60 miles north of San Francisco on the coast, and his wife dropped him off, and we stayed in this B&B behind us here and then rode in the next day. So it was fun to have company for that kind of last day in, and it was a beautiful ride. So this section is really nice. He's a photographer too, so aside from it being beautiful and anybody would take pictures. So here, surprisingly, because even though we were so close to San Francisco, it's not that trafficy because there's a lot more other road options. So the trucks.
I'm not sure if you saw this question. Is this 101?
No, I think 101 is the big road, and I think this is like 1.
Highway 1. Did you go through tunnels along the Oregon coast? And did we?
No, there was no tunnels, actually. So I came in at Florence, which is just west of Eugene, and there were no tunnels. So this is like a little windy road. So it's really a tourist thing and not a truck business traffic thing. And 101 is inland from this. I'm not sure how far, but 101, you go really fast, and this you can't really make any time. So people who were there were either local or tourists, not in a hurry. So very pretty place. And then we finally got to close to San Francisco. That's the Bay Bridge in San Francisco on the right. And this, when I was looking at this just before, as I was getting this set, it's like, it felt funny. Like, look at this. Oh my God, these people are too close together. Like, remember when people did that? It seems like now it just seems really odd to have all these people stuck together. So, and this guy, so this is of course the Golden Gate Bridge, and it was even more crowded than this. This was the only place I was able to take a photo because I had to like take one hand off the handlebars. So it was as crowded as the Brooklyn Bridge, in the middle of a day, with pedestrians and bikes and no separation and just tourists. Everybody's a tourist and nobody's paying attention. And as I was getting back on my bike right at the start of this thing, this guy on kind of a mountain bike kind of brushed past me and brushed into me. He didn't knock me over, and he was going slow, and I was just getting ready. And my first thought was, well, how annoying. This guy just kind of bumped into me and didn't even say, excuse me. And then I kind of looked up and saw what a mess it was. I'm like, oh, I'm going to follow this guy. So I just got on his tail, and he was just a big, wide load with the wide handlebars, and was just making a nice path for me, because it really would have been a pain to be in front on this whole section of the Golden Gate Bridge. And Matt, who was behind me, hadn't had that idea. So he kind of had to fight his whole way across this thing. Very stressful if you're not riding behind a mountain biker who's not worried about pushing a few people out of the way. There's a nice picture of Matt's bike. So this is the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. And this is outside his house in his nice garden, Matt and Jane's house. So I got to the coast August 18th, and I got to their house on the 29th. So that was basically 11 days down the coast. And I stayed in Berkeley from the 29th all the way till September 9th. So like 11 days in Berkeley, a nice vacation. I stayed with Matt and Jane here in their house. And we went on some bike rides. So this is John Muir's house in Martinez, California. It's another National Historic Landmark that, of course.
Did you get to Muir Woods?
No, I've been there before, but it was not, it wasn't quite on the way.
Okay. Just curious.
But Muir Woods is a great sort of replacement for the Redwood National Park if you want to save many hours of driving from San Francisco. And Muir Woods is really nice as well. And this is a mosaic guitar, which if you see, this is Matt's. It's a cassette ring and a chain along the side, curlicuing. So it's a bicycle themed mosaic guitar. One of a kind in the world.
Wow.
Made by my high school friend Amy, who lives a couple of blocks from Matt and Jane. Not the guitar, but the mosaicing. So very cool. And then this is leaving, 11 days later in the morning at very early hour. So off onto this bridge, kind of by Concord. And this is I-80 here. And there's a nice bike lane for a lot of it. So the Bay Area has a lot of good bike infrastructure. So this was actually a very pleasant ride, even though it was between Berkeley and Davis, there was really a good amount of separate bike lanes like this where, even though I could hear the highway, it was very relaxing. So this is some more bike infrastructure. You go ride your bike, over this old rail bridge. Here's on the road, kind of probably by Vacaville, very flat agricultural area, but very quiet as well. And this is some more kind of bike infrastructure. I'm pretty sure this is a closed road, if I remember, which is why it's so graffiti. And this is the family I stayed with, friends of my other friends that are in Berkeley. And this little boy is like a rabid cyclist. I think he's 10. He does 50, 60 mile rides with the adult bike club there in Davis. This is in Davis. And he even got up early in the morning, he and his father, to come ride with me for the first 10 miles or close to 10 miles, 7 or 8 anyway, out of town. And then they, of course, had to come back into town.
If you're in Davis here, did you get to the Cycling Hall of Fame?
No.
Oh my God, it was transported from Jersey. It used to be in New Jersey, and 20, 30 years ago, they moved it to Davis. It's there. I have a second cousin who lives there.
I think the ride to Davis was like an 80-mile, many thousand-foot thing. So by the time I got there, it was 4 in the afternoon, and I just took a shower, and it was, of course, really hot because Davis is hot. It was in the 90s, and I just took a shower in the shade and ate food and went to sleep early so we could leave at dawn.
So Ken says that Davis has a very high cycling mode share. I don't even know what that means, Ken. So maybe you.
Yeah. Well, as opposed to driving.
Oh, driving? Really?
No, as opposed to driving, the mode of transportation is cycling.
Oh, good.
By car, they're, maybe 20% of trips are bicycle or something. They have great bike infrastructure and bike parking and all kinds of stuff.
So they went. So they earned the Hall of Fame legitimately.
They did.
Cool. Thank you, Ken.
And this is a bridge in Sacramento. kind of the Golden Bridge in Sacramento. The bridge looked really nice. Sacramento is so-so, but they have a really nice downtown that they fixed up by the waterfront and the train, and they restored a bunch of blocks to kind of gold rush days, more or less, gold rush and transcontinental railroad. So between that 1849, 1870 feel. So it's actually really worth going to Sacramento to look at that. This is a bike path, a two-way bike path next to a water canal that went on for miles and miles. So there's like no cars anywhere. And it looks like a car road, but it's just a big bike road with no bikes on it, partly because it was midday. Maybe people commute. And this is going up now into the Sierras, an old overland, stagecoach, telegraph place in one of those old towns in the Sierras. And every 1,000 feet, so here's an elevation 5,000 foot sign. So now I'm climbing up the Sierras, and it's really steep and really long. And I actually had a little altitude problem, not that really stopped me, but I felt it after being along the coast all that time and then in Berkeley. So I really hadn't been at any altitude for probably 3 weeks. And this Cook Station, each town was called a station, and they were some certain set amount apart that you could like take cattle on. And the views going over the Sierras are just spectacular everywhere, like left and right. There's just always, lakes and mountains and snow-covered mountains, and you can see way in the distance. So very beautiful and not too trafficky, and the cars are pretty nice. You can see there's like a little shoulder, mostly there's a shoulder. And this is getting up there, so Carson Spur, almost 8,000 feet. And I think I got there in like 2 days, so it was kind of, too much, really. And this is a place where I spent the night. So there's still snow on the mountains there, this beautiful lake. And that's the view out my window with my, here's my rear light charging up and my extra phone battery charging. And this is another lake from the other side, and there's, snow on the mountains. It's just very, just what you expect from the Sierras. A nice change from the crowded coast. And Carson Pass was the high point on this to get over the Sierras here, 85, which is high if you just rode it in a couple of days. And 8% is a steep one. It was only 3 miles of 8%, but it continued down for, it's like 30-mile downhill or something, very long. Beautiful on the other side as well.
Was that a motel where you were charging?
Yeah.
Yep.
This is crossing the Pacific Crest Trail, which it's the West Coast equivalent of the Appalachian Trail. That's where Wild, this Cheryl Strayed, I guess. If you saw the movie or read the book, she was doing the Pacific Crest Trail. So Canada to Mexico along this sort of coastal mountains. And then I'm in Nevada finally, and it's looking more Nevada-like, flatter, open. So I stayed in Carson City, and now this is heading out on US 50 outside of Carson City, heading towards Fallon. So already it starts up a hill. And this was an interesting sign. So there's this horses next 12 miles, and I'm thinking, like, this is US 50. You see how big this road is? It's 5 lanes plus a big shoulder. Like, what's with the horses? These horses are not being led by anybody. These are wild horses that were just walking in a line nicely just off the shoulder of the road in the other direction. And evidently there's all kinds of wild horses here, and they walk around past the Starbucks, and they do that all the time. So very weird. I was happy I got to see the explanation of what that horse sign meant. And this is, we were talking about the rumble strips. This is the good rumble strip. So you see the white line here. The white line has the rumble strip partly on it, and then the rumble strip just, extends a little bit past it. So they really minimize how much rumble strip is in the way of the bicycle. And then this, of course, is a huge, beautiful shoulder. It wasn't like this often, but nice, nice rumble strip laying there. Here's an old, I would love to see what this place looked like in the 40s. Or, it just looks like this was the place, and there's nothing else around it. So restaurant, cocktails, Oasis no more, of course. And then back on the road that just has nothing. Now you see we're back to nothingness. So I'm just riding on the road because the rumble strip is taking up the whole shoulder, and the shoulder's not much anyway. So I did not stay at this hotel, but it was a very nice 1908 scenic old hotel in the next town after Fallon. And in Fallon, I stayed in a, like a Holiday Inn or something. And then back out on 50, speed limit 70. I don't know if you can quite see that there, but you can see like 10 miles ahead of you. So it is safe enough to go 70. And this is where, so once you leave Fallon, there's really nothing between Fallon and I think Austin is the next place. There's nothing at all, gas stations, crossroads, restaurants, convenience store, nothing. So it's whatever the 50, 60, 70 miles, but every morning I just had to have everything with me. And this is a typical, view of some sand dunes off on the side before you get to the mountains.
How far in advance did you book? An earlier question from Ken was also how many water bottles, 3 or more?
I only had the 2 24-ounce water bottles, but I have a 2.5 liter platypus, which I don't know. Let me see if it's seeable. I kind of doubt it. So you see this thing that says platypus here? It's a clear plastic flat bottle that flattens completely flat and weighs 1 ounce, and it holds 2.5 liters. So on this section, I was pretty much filling that up every day. So I'd have 2.5 liters of water, and I keep that in the fridge overnight, so it would be nice and cold. And the 2 24-ounce ones, one with plain water and one with my Cytomax drink mix, electrolyte and slow burn carb and caffeine, my favorite mix. And then I would typically also get a Frappuccino and a V8 and a chocolate milk, like a pint chocolate milk and whatever size the Frappuccinos are, 8 ounce, 12 ounce, and a 12-ounce V8, and I'd stick all that together in the fridge overnight and stick it in the pannier all together. And it would stay cold probably for 4 hours. Starting out in the morning, it tended to be upper 30s to low 40s for the first few hours. So the stuff would stay cold for a while. So I'd have, every hour, I'd have one of my treats, in the back. First, I'd have the Frappuccino first, and then I'd have the chocolate milk before it spoiled at like 1 hour in or hour and a half, it's Frappuccino, another hour and a half, it's chocolate milk, another hour and a half, it's the V8 to get the electrolytes. And then I'd pour out the water from this 2.5 liter thing into the other water bottles. So it was easy enough. It's just you had to have taken care of everything the night before. This is an over-the-shoulder shot. So you can see the road there it goes over this range and comes down probably 500 feet, 1,000 feet. And then you're just kind of going flat for 20 miles, and then you go up another 500 or 1,000 feet over another one. So this is the next summit probably. And this is pretty much what the day was going to be. So it's Austin, 64 miles from wherever I am. Maybe I was in Fallon, and then Eureka's 134, which is the next one. And there's nothing in each one of these, there's nothing in between them. So you must go from Austin to Eureka and Eureka to Ely, and there's no other options. So it's like 70 miles, and then it's another 70, 2 70-mile days. And always just beautiful, open. It did get hot, so I'd start really early, and it was cold, like just above freezing, and kind of not quite unpleasant because I knew how hot it would get later. So this is a dawn, not a sunset, of course, because I'm always going at dawn. And every dawn was beautiful, and the road is empty, and it's quiet and great. And this is what the going over the range, the little pass through the range looks like. And as you crest the top, you'd see this long downhill in front of you. It's till the next one, and it's going over this next one next. So that was probably 2 or 3 hours away. And you just look at it, and it's slowly getting closer. And this is the next town. This is Austin, I believe. So the town there's pretty much just one main street, and there's 1 or 2 blocks parallel, and the side streets, probably the town is like 10 blocks long, and a bunch of motels and restaurants, and people actually live and work here. It's not really a tourist town because this US 50 doesn't have enough tourists on it to really support a tourist town. So the motels this was one of the few days I had real trouble finding a motel because there was loads of construction workers working all kinds of construction, and they all were using up the motel space. So that's pretty much who stays there. It's not tourists, it's workers working on roads or construction either in the town or on something that's somewhere off in somebody's ranch or something, and they wind up staying in these few towns. This I thought was funny. It's the national forest with no trees. There are no trees anywhere here. So it's sort of a grass forest. So this is the Austin, that town I just went through. So it's 7,400. So those other summits were like 4,500, and this is more like 75. So they're pretty big hills. So this is now probably down 1,000 or 1,500 feet, maybe 2,000, something like that. And you can just see the road there.
How did you find a hotel place to stay in the place that was hard?
Well, there was only a few motels, and you just go to each one, and and luckily it just worked out. I was using hotels.com on my phone, so mostly the day before I would book. In this place, I was booking each one the next day. So as soon as I'd get into one, I'd try and book the next day.
What grade were these hills?
There was this kind of 5 to 7% steep, not crazy because they're long, and they have plenty of room to switch back them as needed. But 7's pretty steep with the load, but they were averaging more in the 5 or 6. But pretty, endless. It was you'd be going uphill for 2 hours or something. So there's another summit, 65. Of course, they don't have what the bottom is, but I think the bottom is kind of 3,000 2,000, 3,000. So this is if you followed me on Instagram, this is a picture of shade, which you can see from those other pictures. There is no shade for days and days and days. So if I'd find a sign, it was casting shade. So here's my V8 bottle resting in the shade because it's really hot. And I would squat down in the shade next to it and drink it very
Where's
happy.
your tent?
So the tent, that was a sad story. The place I most needed the tent, sleeping bag, air mattress was this section where there's nothing at all around. But I didn't, because I took so many days off in Berkeley, that 11-day rest, I decided to send myself that whole camping gear, even though it was just 5.5 pounds. I sent it to myself in Fallon, right at the beginning of this big basin and range place. But the post office in Fallon gave my box to somebody who worked at the air base because they got a bunch of boxes sent to them, general delivery, and they didn't pay attention. So when I got there, after much searching around, they realized what happened and my stuff was gone, and the guy had gotten reassigned in the intervening couple of days to Texas or something, and he was gone with my stuff. So I didn't have my camping gear at this whole section where I really needed it. So that was kind of a shame. So I was really counting on hotels, motels, and there's no warm showers hosts here, and there's no.
Did you ultimately ever get it back?
Yes. Finally, just the day before I finished, I was talking daily, sometimes twice a day, with the post office person who had given my stuff away, who felt terrible and potentially could have lost her job over it. And I said I had it, and she was offering to pay for it. And I said, well, actually, it's like $700 or $800 worth of stuff because it's this ultra light, 800 filled down sleeping bag, a tent that weighs 3 pounds, an air mattress that weighs, like half a pound. So it was really expensive. So when she heard like 800, and I insured it for 800, so I said, well, the insurance can cover it. But I think that meant she would be in a lot of trouble. So she really made a major effort to track the guy down, who did finally return it. So I did get it all back.
Cool.
So this is Eureka, next town over. This was a bigger place than Austin was. They had a big Main Street, but they probably went for like a mile of Main Street.
When you finally arrive at this town and you see the sign, did you yell out, Eureka?
Yeah, it was tempting. Well, I was in Eureka, Kansas, and I was in Eureka, Utah later also. So there's a lot of Eurekas. So this was not my first Eureka, I can tell you. But I was happy to be done because it was hot. So this is just a nice, beautiful flowers are growing next to the road. I think it's because there's enough moisture kind of coming off this little embankment that they get just enough to last, because out in the rest, away from the road, there's nothing like this growing. And this is the typical scenery. It's just dry, beautiful mountains, and the mountains are just miles and miles away. So another summit, another downhill. So not only would it would go down steeply for like 2 or 3 miles, but it would then, you see it sort of level out a little bit here. It would continue to go down at a really, kind of a 1% feeling grade. So you can't quite tell, but I would be going 20 miles an hour for like 15, 20 minutes. And I'm like, oh, I guess this is a real downhill, because I don't usually go 20 miles an hour. And so at the end of all those hills, it was like that. But of course, as soon as you got to the bottom, you'd have the other side of it where you're going up and you're wondering why you're killing yourself just to go a 10. So it kind of averaged out, but it was fun having the nice long downhill. Here's some more treasured shade. There were not many signs because there's only a sign when there's something to say, and there's no crossroads and no towns and no nothing. So, you know, a sign with shade was really a big deal. So you can be sure I stopped in this shade for a while. And because of the altitude and the desert, you know, it's super dry air, and it's probably, it's around 4,000 feet. So the difference between the sun and the shade temperature is probably like 30 degrees, very different. So in the sun, it's like 90, 95, and in the shade, it's 70. So sitting in the shade is really pleasant. Another range. Here it's called a summit instead of a pass.
So Ed, I'm discovering a lot of nicknames for you. Someone just wrote, no shade for Mushroom Ed.
Yes, I have been known as Mushroom Ed. When I do treks, people realize quickly that I'm capable of finding any shade possible. You can find, if you're looking for me, look for the shade. And if you're looking for shade, you know, look for me.
Someone also referred to you as Eddie. That's my brother's name. But I never thought of calling you Eddie.
Pre-work, I was an Eddie.
Got it.
College and before I was Eddie. At work, when I first started working and I introduced myself and say, hi, I'm Eddie, people would shake my hand and say, hi, Ed, nice to meet you. So after like the 5th person that did that, I realized I must be Ed. So more passes and more straight, flat roads. And you look at it and you always know, you see those mountains that you're going to be going over those. And another pass. I didn't take a picture of all of them, but there was a lot, you know, there was probably 3 a day, I guess. And it was like 5, 6 days of this. So here's a steep one. This is steeper than usual, a 6% 5-miler. That's a lot. Not the 5-mile part, but to stay 6% average for that is a lot, which meant I had to come up that. And here you can just see in the distance there, the road, it's going to go down and come up this and get through these mountains. So you see this road out here, and somewhere I would like to play the game of guessing where it's going to go through, because I had like 3-4 hours to look at it and say, oh, will it go through there? Or will it, maybe it'll go all the way around? So here's, you know, the top of a different path, little different kinds of rocks, you know, a little different view as you're coming down. And this is now finally nearing the end. I'm headed for Delta. So Baker is the town outside of Great Basin National Park. And Delta's in Utah. So here's the road. It's just going straight down, 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 and then it's going to go up, 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 and somewhere in there it gets over that. And these were one of the first windmills. I was surprised I didn't see more of them. A big windmill farm outside of Baker and the national park. Great Basin National Park, very interesting place, but difficult to get to. Here's an interpretive sign that said something, but I was there because it's a place to lean my bike and I can sit in the shade. Even though it's on the ground, it's in the shade. A treasure. So Great Basin has incredible caves. These Lehman caves are really interesting in a place like this. And then Wheeler Peak is over 10,000 feet. So it's way high up and very interesting. So this is a little cheat. This is Wheeler Peak. I was here 2 years earlier driving in 2016 because I'd broken my femur and my wrist and couldn't. I planned on riding cross country in 2016 and couldn't, so I drove cross country instead. So I stopped by here and drove up to the campground at 10,000 feet and went on a hike, but not to the top, but just near the top. So still snow there. They have bristlecone pines that are like 3,000 years old. Very different from the rest of everything else that's in this basin that's just flat, you know, hot, dry nothingness like this. So this is continuing on east. And then there's this one little, this is the borderline, the border inn, cafe, bar, convenience store, motel, RV park, everything. So I get a nice welcome to Utah sign. And this is where it's good to like pay attention to the map. So next service is 83. Turned out it wasn't really 83, it was 88. There's really nothing at all for 88 miles. You know, no stores at all or houses to, you know, nobody's door to knock on, there's nothing there. So this day I just did my usual fill up the, you know, get the V8 and the chocolate milk and the Frappuccino and fill up the 2.5 liter thing and fill up the water bottles and get some extra munchies for lunch. So this is dawn, obviously. So Delta was where I was headed, 88 miles to Delta. Hinckley, there was a little town, but there was nothing in Hinckley. There wasn't even a store in Hinckley, but it was there. People lived there, but they all drive the 6 miles to Delta, I guess. And this is Wheeler Peak up here. This is the little hotel, motel, bar, convenience store at dawn. So I kind of turned around and took pictures every half hour or so as I was going. And it's, you know, like that's, so there's Wheeler Peak and it's just still there and there's the road. And it was nice to see, you know, that in half an hour it changed. A rare selfie. I'm surprised they left that in. There's Wheeler Peak still in the back. And it's back there somewhere. This is the road. So you can kind of see that it's going uphill now. And it's just going back there, just back. Yeah, that's Wheeler Peak off on the side there. So probably 2 hours later. And then there's 8%. They're coming up. And probably that means I did an 8%er coming up, which was, by this point, that was fine. And this was the first tree I think I saw in like a week, other than in front of somebody's house in a town. So that's real shade. And of course, some other mountain. And now this is all Utah. And probably this is around lunchtime or so. And I'm like, oh, 43, that's too bad. Well, I'm halfway, but there's still been nothing and there's still a hill and it's getting hot and there's a headwind. And I'm like, oh, well, at this rate, I'm getting in at like, you know, 8 at night. But luckily I don't know if the wind changed, but I kept turning around because the road doesn't go that straight. So this is going down and finally it's going to go left. So this is not the Great Salt Lake. It's just a little nothing Salt Lake. And this is the salt, whatever that Salt Lake is in the back, and a big shade, very nice.
So Ed, there's a question as you went through these very long stretches. Did you have self-service? If not, were you concerned about how you might find help if you needed it?
Mostly there was no self-service. There was not much traffic, but the traffic would come like 3 or 4 cars at a time, you know, and then there'd be nobody sometimes for 20 minutes. But if a couple of times a day, there'd be people coming from both directions, and I would just stop and pull off the road because there was no shoulder. And I didn't want them to have to figure it out, though the shoulder was not dirt, it was sand. It was like, I had to get off the bike on the road and slowly put the bike onto the sand. And almost always, either the first or last car in the pack would that was about to pass me would stop and ask if I was okay, because they just drove through this total nothingness and they couldn't believe there was a bike, and then they saw a bike pulled off the road. So pretty much every time that I pulled off, that, you know, once a day, twice a day, people would ask. So I kind of knew if something really happened that people would stop for me, because it's such an isolated place that everybody is really helpful there.
Good question and good answer.
But mostly I did not have cell service. But, you know, occasionally, sometimes when you get up to one of those passes, there'd be a cell tower up there, or there'd just be enough coverage to get you 40 miles line of sight to some mountain that did have coverage. So there was occasional coverage.
So when you planned this trip out, you had a clear sense that there were going to be these stretches. You could tell that from the planning. Okay.
The adventure cycling maps, yeah, are very good that way. They have big, bold letters. It says, you know, no services next 88 miles, you know, make sure you have what you need. Anything over like a 40-mile no services, they give you a warning on the maps. So this is all the nothingness of Utah, you know, like it's 60, 70, 80 miles. And then finally there's a train line, and this is because there's some irrigation, things are green and there's some trees. Here's another oasis. Not the closed restaurant, though I didn't go look to see what it was. And this is the guy who I stayed with, my warm showers host. That was my last night on the road in Delta, Utah. Very nice guy who came out with me riding the next day in the morning at 7 a.m. or something. And he usually goes riding then also, because it's just too hot out. And it's mostly flat, but you can see this, you know, this is going to be a big down, big up. Whenever there's some water crossing, it cuts into it. And going next to the train tracks. And then this is my friend's van that lives in Park City. So I called him in the morning when I left and told him what road I was going to be on. And it was kind of an hour and a half drive for him, and it was probably a 2 or 3 hour bike for me. But since there's only one road and you can't miss each other, you know, we just said, well, we'll see each other go in an opposite direction. So he picked me up and threw the stuff in the van. So this is a Sprinter van that was modified into a camper, very nice camper. So that's the end of the bike trip. But then, you know, it's never really over, because as soon as I got to Park City, then we're hiking in the mountains. This is his wife and the dog, the very cute dog. And hiking in the Uintas, like at 10,000 feet. And we went bike riding because I didn't have enough bike riding. And I wasn't faster than him because I didn't get any faster. I was stronger, probably, but I still go the same speed I always go. I just don't really get tired anymore at this point. And we went mountain biking, which was really scary to me because I was so used to the loaded touring bike that really can't take much. Having this full suspension bike, it took me probably half an hour to believe that I could run over a rock and do all kinds of weird things with this bike and it would be okay. And then it was kind of fun. And then a little more hiking the next day. So I was there for like a week or so visiting. Very, you know, beautiful hiking there. And that's the end.
Oh, that's the end?
That's the end of the pictures. I can do one little techie thing.
Oh, look at this. Did you do this, the 49? That's so cool.
What?
We got 40 people, and we're seeing about 25 of them because I didn't turn on the show up to 49 at a time. Hold on one second. Hang on. There we go. Let's get everybody on this. Look at that. They're all clapping for you, but we do have a couple more quick questions. So At any time the journey, did you feel scared? And if there were no services for 88 miles, how did you get to a place to rest if you ride 50 to 60? I guess on those days you rode longer.
Well, the reason, as I said before, the reason I was riding 50 to 60 is because other than in this kind of weird place, the towns tended to be 25 or 30 miles apart. So you either stop at the first town or the second town. And that was kind of, I either did 30 miles or I do 50 or 60 because there's a town at 50 or 60. And if I wanted to go more, I would have had to do like 80. So that was why 50 or 60 is good. And doing 60, I would get in by noon or 1 in the afternoon and could look around town. But yeah, after riding for a month, I could easily ride for 10 hours and do 90 miles and feel fine and do it again day after day. It's just then all I'm doing is riding my bike and I'm not looking at anybody or anything. So it kind of defeats the purpose. But
so Ellen is thanking you for the series, and I want to let everyone know before you go that next Friday night, we have another friend of Ed and mine and the club's, Leslie Tierstein, who's going to be a special guest talking about her time in Italy. And it's not one of these typical tourist sort of experiences. It's her spending a lot of time in Italy and riding in areas that are less common. So it sounds really, really interesting. And if you know of anybody else who's taken an interesting trip like Ed's or Leslie's, let me know, and we'll consider bringing them on to do one of these sessions. Maybe not 3 in a row.
Yeah, somebody's gone for 4 months. Yeah, Leslie is riding her folding bike, a Bike Friday. So it's an interesting kind of folding bike. If you've ever thought of getting one or you have one, Leslie's book will make you want a folding bike.
And the other thing, just as a couple of quick commercials, if you're interested, is that tomorrow night at 7, we have, if for any of you who were on one of my Montreal trips, we had this wonderful thing happen where someone brought a little guitar and people started playing music. So we're going to have a sing-along for the Beatles tomorrow at 7. And then on Sunday, Ed and Len Diamond are going to do a stroll down memory lane for David Schlichting. Do you want to say anything about that, Ed?
No, probably anybody who's on this that knows him. So David was killed a little over a year ago bicycling. So we're doing a memorial service for him, joint with New York Cycle Club and Bike New York and the 5BBC. And so we have his family, from Kansas and Colorado joining us, and people he went to high school with in Kansas from Dodge City, and a bunch of people who know him from here. So if you knew him at all, it'll be interesting to.
It's 7 p.m. and if you've been getting the weeklies, it's the link to sign up for it is in there. So just sign up on Eventbrite and you'll get the link a few hours before. All right, and we also have a mechanical class that we're running on Wednesday nights that seems to be getting some traction as well. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ed, for really sharing this most unique and in fact, why don't I go ahead and unmute everybody? Just go ahead and hear all the clapping.
Great.
Eddie.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all for coming and stay healthy and enjoy this. It's going to be a sunny weekend. So if you're out riding, ride safely.
Okay, bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
Ed.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Marcy.